Southern citizens say no to house arrest. There is no justification for a government to lock up its own innocent people.
Is that what it was for selling books, sweetheart? Is that what you were doing, selling books?
Yes.
Is that what you were trying to do, sell libraries?
Morning.
Hi.
Do you want to make a statement, Moira?
Well, we're fighting for freedom today. I mean, the state manufacture a health crisis and think they can strip us of all our human rights. And I'm an author and Stella's a former biology teacher. And we were lending books to help the people of Dundee who are, like everyone, they're so alone at home, being psychologically tortured. Well, it's not good news. They are charging me with culpable and reckless conduct, and a court date set for 26th May at 10 a.m. And so it's quite shocking, and that's the first time I've been in court. And what will I say? The only good thing is the judge, is he a judge or sheriff?
Sure.
Has lifted the bail conditions that I'm allowed into my own city, and I can attend a protest if I choose to do so. Not that I plan to at the moment, and I wasn't organising a protest. And anyway, this is because on the day they didn't take the suitcase. They were very selective with the evidence they took, and I've got the library book to show the names and addresses I collected, library cards. And this was a book, Ian Forster, The Machine Stops, you know, with the library borrow card in it. And so I was being completely truthful and trying to just help the people of Dundee get through this psychological, well, the PSYOP, you know, this psychological torture that we're being put through. And if you don't have any money, you don't have a computer, you have no access to anything apart from maybe a radio, which is just constant. How many died? How many cases? How many, take the injection. This experimental injection, the trials aren't up, I think, till 2023. So it's breaking the Nuremberg Code, coercion. And the other thing they're breaking is there's no medical necessity for these injections at all, because perfectly safe, cheap treatments that have existed for years. Hydroxychloroquine plus zinc plus others. So they're also breaking the Nuremberg Code by experimenting on people when there is no medical necessity. So anyway, I was just trying to help people in various ways, and so is Stella, and we'll keep telling the truth, eh?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we have to. I've been charged mainly with not social distancing, which the police have been told not to enforce. It's very much a individual choice, and not wearing a mask and approaching a police officer, not social distancing with her, but she was the one that clamped me,
Yeah.
So that's the actual charge with the police officer. That's what they're charging you, not social distancing with the arresting officer.
Yes.
That's crazy.
It doesn't make sense, any of it. But also they're saying that it was a protest, and it's not.
No.
It was never a
See,
protest.
the Courier lied, and we've got evidence, when you spoke
Yeah.
about that earlier, that there was
Well.
40 people in the square. There was not, and we've got film footage to show the square was empty.
Good morning to the UK column viewers and listeners. I'm here in a very smart little studio in David Scott's house in Scotland. It's actually quite a nice day outside. It's not too cold. A little bit overcast, but I have actually seen some blue sky today, so it's quite a nice day. And I'm delighted to be joined here by Moira, who I've only met a few minutes ago, so this is going to be a real interview of two people getting to know each other a bit. But I know that Moira has been a very brave campaigner tackling some of the issues around lockdown. And what we hope to do in the next hour or hour and a bit is hear how she got started, and what she discovered and what she experienced when she tried to stand up against some of the COVID rules and particularly the lockdown rules. So Moira, I'm going to say welcome to David's house.
Thank you. Hello, viewers.
And now your real name is Moira Malcolm.
Yeah, that's my maiden name.
But you're known as Moira Dundee.
That's right. That's the name of my YouTube channel.
Okay.
That's my stage name.
That's your stage name. Okay. So let's do the simple thing. So for the viewers and listeners, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I believe that you were involved in computing. That's your main profession.
Well, I actually started off doing architecture, studying architecture. And I started at the Mackintosh School of Architecture in Glasgow. And and I left there because we weren't allowed to use the university sports facilities. Anyway, at the end of third year, the head of Glasgow, who knew me, was my external examiner.
Right.
And he failed me on the very last day when I should have had my degree. I actually had a job
for architecture.
Yes, and I actually had a job set up in Edinburgh.
Right. So there's another little question I have to ask in there. You left because of problems with sports facilities. So what were the sports facilities?
Well, they had beautiful sports facilities at Glasgow University, and architecture was actually first in the prospectus. But when I arrived, I found out I was a part-time student at Glasgow University and full-time at the art school.
Right.
And I was in a horrible residence, and it was a very, very unhappy, lonely year. So I think this, to bring on to now immediately, I think this is why I felt so much for the students that were incarcerated in Dundee.
Right.
There was 500 of them, you know, when one tested positive or something.
Yes.
They were incarcerated, and I was particularly concerned because I know that it's the most lonely I've ever felt in my life, being in a student residence.
Right.
And I know of people can take their own life, even
right.
Without this going on. So anyway, we did a protest outside a student residence in Dundee and said you can leave, they can't hold you there, and we might have saved a life. You never know.
Right. Right.
Some students shouted "fuck off." Other ones, there was a boy on the ground floor went like heart shaped with his hands. You don't know,
Yes.
And the armed police came. The armed police came to that. But anyway, after... So I back to, if you want to know the story, what happened, I ended up fighting...
just let me come in, just a minute. I'm just trying to pin you down here. So so your background is an architecture degree, which I know is very long. How long does it take?
No, but I'm saying I was failed.
Right.
And then I started repeating the year for no reason whatsoever. I mean, I passed... And it's just, if somebody doesn't like you, it's just, what do you call it, opinion,
Right.
And, but I did end up going to, I thought they were going to fail me again. The power, so it taught me the power of an institution. If they have it in for you, you will achieve nothing, no matter how right you are, no matter what arguments. And my mother was an excellent secretary.
Right.
She'd actually worked at United Nations for a bit.
Right.
And so she was very good at letter writing. And so maybe that taught me campaigning.
Well, okay.
But I eventually 5 years later, I went to Newcastle University and repeated the third year and got it. So I've got an honours degree in architecture.
Okay.
No. But I would have become an architect if that hadn't happened.
Okay.
But then, because I was very suited to it, and I worked in architects' offices.
Right.
But then I ended up I couldn't do the last 2 years. I couldn't face it. It's 5 years full time,
Right.
but it would have been 6 for me.
Right.
I couldn't face it. It was so cruel. And so I ended up doing a master's in computing when I was 30.
Right.
Which was software technology, which is basically computer programming.
Right.
So that's why I've had all the computer skills to do what I've done.
Yeah, but what you're describing is you absolutely got a professional background, and so that means that you have a brain which, if you decide you're seeing something which isn't right, people should respect you because you're capable of working out that something isn't quite right.
Well, I think computer programming, the thing you need is logic.
Well, okay, yeah.
And I've got logic.
Right.
Anyone who's got a logical mind could see this from the outset for what it was.
Yeah, okay.
None of it made sense.
Okay, now let's pin down a time scale. So what was the date where you started to really question what was going on? I often say to people, I've done this in interviews over many years, I say to people, when was your life normal and when did it change? So what was the time frame when you went from going along with things to suddenly realising something wasn't right?
Well, I was trying to avoid the news anyway because I realised years ago that every news bulletin they would somehow get in about climate change. It was global warming, wasn't it? I even had a joke with my husband. We'd be in the car and the news would come on and I'd say, right, guess, what's your guess? And we'd guess how many seconds or minutes before they mentioned global warming.
Right, yeah.
And I say like 30 seconds and he'd say 2 minutes, and I'd win. And so I could see that they're pushing agendas.
Yes.
But that was about it. And so I was avoiding the news and then thinking if it doesn't affect me, I shouldn't be concerned. If I can't change something, there's no point in being, upset about it. Yeah. So I wasn't watching the news in January and all the stuff from China. I was ignoring it.
Okay.
But then when they said they were passing this legislation and it just passed in Parliament and it passed faster than the speed of light.
The legislation being all of the COVID restrictions.
Yes, the Coronavirus Act 2020.
Right.
I managed to find it online and I read a few paragraphs of that and I believed that we were in grave danger.
Right. So that's a very strong reaction to it instantly. I remember watching it unfold and I had a sense that something not very nice was happening. But you're using the expression grave danger, which I think is absolutely right. So that started you really concentrating on what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And what did that lead to then?
Well, it's hard to remember the exact time scale of what I saw first, but I did feel that I didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker. Because I didn't know anything about the health aspect. Right. I didn't know anything about viruses.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to say anything out of step. So I tried to be patient and I thought, wait 2 weeks. They said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. This is extreme, we know, but
right.
2 weeks to flatten the curve. So I tried to be patient and wait and see if they then dropped it.
Right.
But there was also, I was using Twitter a lot at the time. And somebody had alerted me to the fact that the COVID-19 had been downgraded from a high consequence infectious disease on the 19th of March 2020, prior to them passing the legislation. And it was on a government website.
Yeah, I remember this very well because we reported on this and it was very significant because I think it was the first real indication that what they were saying, if you said it wasn't true, that's one way of coming in, but at least questions needed to be asked about what they were saying.
That's right, and it says on it, mortality, now we know mortality rate is low overall, right? And then I was also thinking, could it be a fake website? So I really tried to delve. So that's what I'm saying, my computing skills have been handy throughout this.
Yes.
And so that was a wonderful year I did. And I worked as a computer programmer, earning a decent salary for a few years. Anyway, so I found it was the real government website. And then the next thing I heard, it was actually Vernon Coleman who concurred the significance of that.
Yes.
He said when he saw it, he thought, oh, brilliant. Phew, we can relax. Life will go back to the crisis over. And then he said, and then he found out they were passing that legislation. Yeah. So yes, it was Dr. Vernon Coleman who alerted me to the fact that it was what was happening was completely out of step with the real public health risk.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you're thoroughly alerted to the fact this is going on. You don't like what's going on. You get to a point where you decide you need to do something to help people or warn people. So where did he go next then?
Well, after the 2 weeks, they extended it by another week. You know, they never want to do it, of course, but
reluctant.
Yeah, they're always reluctant to make our life worse. And so I didn't know what to do because we weren't allowed to go into people's houses. Couldn't meet up.
Yeah.
You weren't even supposed to. You were told not to meet someone outside the house. You could only leave the house for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And one of them was exercise.
Yes.
So I already had a YouTube channel, Moira Dundee, because I'd done a few political comedy sketches on it. And so I had a compulsion to tell the world that I didn't consent. And I hoped that people might see it and realise that they're not wrong in their thinking, you know, to know they're not alone. I've been very lucky that I've had company throughout the lockdown, but it must have been horrific for people completely alone.
Well, it clearly was, because we knew at the time some people were saying that they were in a very lonely, isolated position, and then of course afterwards, a lot of people came forward to talk about not only their own experiences, but experiences of relatives, particularly elderly relatives, who ended up in horrible situations. Yeah. So you did the YouTube channel,
so
and then
I had the YouTube channel anyway. So I had the idea. I thought, well, how one person protesting isn't going to have any impact in empty streets, is it? So I had the idea to make a little short video and put it on YouTube.
Right. And what happened?
So I bought 2 little megaphones and recorded my voice on. One said, "Innocent citizens say no to house arrest," and the other one said, "There is no justification for a government to lock up its own innocent people." Anyway, I recorded that onto the little megaphones. I put them on the ground so that I could skip. I mean, it was logistically quite difficult by yourself, filming yourself.
Right.
So I had my camera on tripod.
Okay, and the skipping was you demonstrating exercise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was trying to do a protest within the law.
Yeah.
But I still thought that the culture of fear, it was so bad. I thought the police could have knocked at the door saying I was encouraging people to break the law.
I experienced a case where having arranged to meet somebody for just a social event in their house. Well, it wasn't a social event in numbers. We were going to have a meal, and that's all it was. And then eventually it was obvious that one of the 2 individuals was very uncomfortable, because in their mind, for us to be together, just 4 of us together in the house, was in breach of the rules. And what if the police came? And this shocked me, because I didn't realise that other people were so frightened by the laws that were coming in. And the result was, in the end, I'm saying we, because it was my wife and myself, but we said, okay, we'll just stop and have a coffee. We've driven this way, we'll just stop and have a coffee and then we'll go. But when we were driving back, and obviously a little bit of discussion between us, and I said, wow, I couldn't believe that somebody was so frightened by the law, or the possibility of the police, that social interaction was cancelled.
I really find throughout that people didn't have fear of the virus, the alleged virus. It was the fear of the law. It was the fear of the police. The fear of fines.
Yes.
Losing their job.
Yeah.
Well, if you went to a protest, you could lose. If you were arrested, you'd lose your job. If you were in care, if you were in teaching, there was loads of things. People were more scared.
Yeah, and of course later we were to learn that through the Spy B team, the psychological team working alongside the supposed COVID experts, that they were deliberately using applied psychology to make people fearful. That was that key document that we got hold of.
That's right. Sorry to interrupt. I also heard, in case I forget, it was the original lockdown is a prison term.
Yes.
And it was and it was Laura Glass. That's right. She was 15 years old, and she did this as school project. The grandchildren meet the children are in contact with the most people. Going to school, going to groups, seeing people. And so the presumption is that people are contagious.
Yes.
So if they stopped seeing people,
yes.
if you locked up children, then you would stop an epidemic.
Yes.
Right? But she was 15 years old and you nothing. It's not her fault, by the way.
Yeah.
But there was a man who came out of retirement. He'd worked at the WHO. He's supposed to be responsible for ridding the world of smallpox. But anyway, he flew out of retirement and wrote a paper with another few academics. And he answered every single question saying, don't do this, don't do that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And even closing airports had proved in the past it had no impact
whatsoever.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating. But the thing that you should never do, if there is a real public health crisis and if we are contagious, that's never been proved, by the way. The most important thing is to keep people calm.
Yes.
That's what he said. The most important thing is to keep people calm. And so when I read that, I thought they're doing everything to create fear. So that also proves that this is absolutely sinister what the government's doing.
Yes.
There's no mistake here.
And psychologists are saying with not only the hindsight of the event, but also their knowledge of psychology, that if you put people in a stressed situation, you make them anxious, not only does that affect their mental health, it affects their physical health. So by applying, I call it malicious, because it is malicious psychology, to introduce fear, you are actually creating the conditions to make people even more unwell. Let's assume that the virus story was correct.
That's right.
You then applied psychology. So all this was going on. Your idea was to try and rebel against lockdown by getting out, taking your exercise, by skipping and have a protest. So where did you go? Where did you go on the streets to skip? And what reaction did you get from the public? What reaction did you get from the police?
Well, I chose a spot. I went down, I think it was about 7:30 at night. I went in the summer. Oh yeah, it was April. It was still light though. Yeah. And because I remember on my way back, they were just starting to clap, the carers.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I went down to the pier. There was no one there. I didn't want anyone to be seeing me, and because I'm quite shy actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So right. So in the first instance, it's for you. You go out. It is a protest, but you're just going to get some exercise.
But I'm going to get I'm wanting the film footage.
Okay. Right.
And my husband didn't want me to go to do it because I was wearing my tracksuit and I had my little megaphone. He didn't, and I looked at him in the eye, and I'll never forget it. And I said to him, "One day you'll be proud of me."
Right, excellent. And I hope he is, because he should be. So you did that, and then what happened? You did more, did you?
I mean, the thing about that is I got vicious comments under the YouTube video, really vicious, and they were saying they'd reported me, and
for breaching the regulations
the restrictions are for your own good, just really attacking.
Yes. Yeah.
And but then what I've learned, so because I've been seeing this from the outset, I was on Twitter as well. Right. And I ended up with 2,000 followers before I was kicked off.
Okay.
And so I've seen it right from the outset, and I learned about the 77 Brigade.
Right.
That the British Army, the taxpayer is actually paying for a branch of the British Army to attack us. Yes. All day, every day on social media, anyone who's speaking out against the government narrative. Yeah,
because that was a public statement that 77 Brigade was going to work alongside the government in order to help enforce COVID-19 policies, and I found that outrageous and alarming, because to bring, you know, an army unit, albeit one that was about social media and monitoring the internet. I found this utterly disgusting.
Yeah, so they deem me the enemy. So
Yeah.
when they're putting the comments underneath, so it's making me out to be a lone wolf,
Yeah.
to be like insane. You know, that's the narrative. So if anyone looks at it, if anyone
Right.
found the video, they'd read underneath and say, "Oh, you know, she's been dismissed."
Okay.
It was just yeah.
So where does it go next? Is it that because on the desk in front of us, we're going to comment about this a bit more, but just so that our viewers and listeners today know, we've got a newspaper article spread out on the desk in front of us. Now, you got attacked pretty viciously in this article, but you also had the police coming in your direction. So which happened first? Did the media go for you or the police?
Well, the police was was arrested was quite a bit later. That was in January 2021.
Right, so the newspaper article comes first.
Yeah, so that was in 7th of August.
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
But what I did was when the mask mandate came out on public transport and shops, I hoped that was perhaps the straw to break the camel's back.
Yes.
So I came up with a leaflet myself, and even because everything was shut and libraries were shut, you couldn't even print things, photocopy things.
Yeah.
So I realised I was in a unique situation because I had printer and paper. So and I would print to A4 and then cut them with a scalpel knife to make it A5, and I went and took a picture of me with a pair of pants on my head. That was on the leaflet. I wasn't wearing pants in the street, but the leaflet said, "Say pants to muzzles."
Okay.
So I went down. I went into Dundee City Centre by myself, very brave, and looking back, and I thought, and I saw everyone was doing it. They were wearing masks,
Yes.
and it was just heartbreaking.
And surreal. That is a surreal experience when everybody around you is wearing masks, and then you're not, of course. And it does have an impact. And I'm sure it was meant to. We can talk about that a little bit separately. So you were on a one-woman protest on the street in Dundee.
And then I think a man at the golf club that I'd been in, he saw it, and it was quite funny as well. You know, I always try to have a wee bit of humour.
Yes.
I mean, it became impossible later on, but he'd seen it, was laughing, and his ex-wife had seen the seriousness of it. So anyway, she came along. She wanted to join me.
Oh, wow.
So she came along, and then a boy, he was really nice, in his 30s. And he came along. So just gradually people, joined me.
Right.
But I printed them all out. I only missed 2 Saturdays out of, I think it was 4 months. I was there every Saturday between the sort of 12 and half 1. And the 2 weeks I wasn't there, I provided them with them.
Right, so
with the leaflets.
So in that time, when you're regularly appearing on the streets with your protests, what reaction did you get from the public?
Quite hostile. But then you had to realise that the people who were going into town shopping, they're the ones that are not upset about it. The people who, a lot of people just wouldn't go.
Yes, okay.
You'd say, well, I'm just going to do everything online, or I won't go. So it was the hardest core that you're dealing with. But I felt that was important. There's no point in, they stand in the parks, people made friends, but I think, you always want to be where people are not thinking the same as you if you want to change minds.
So how did they actually react? Did they speak to you? Did they shout at you? Did they ignore you? What did they do?
A bit of everything.
Right.
A bit of everything, but we gave out tons of leaflets.
Right, and did you manage to sort of engage any of them in a conversation? You're handing out a leaflet. Did they ask a question or?
Well, it's you started to know the ones that not to bother with. There's no point in spending 10 minutes
with somebody that's just a blank wall. Yeah.
So we sort of learned not to engage.
Okay.
If people were that hostile.
Right. And do you think, looking back, that you did make an impact on some of those people? That you took them from the fact that there they were walking around like a little robot with their mask on. They get a leaflet, they see what you're doing, they talk to you. Do you think that what you did made a positive impact on some of those people?
Definitely. And you do meet impressive people that just say, well, I've never worn one.
Yeah.
They're not getting me to, not getting me to wear one. I mean, you do meet people who just said no from the outset.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I just a little story from me to sort of echo this. I always went out walking the dog. That was my exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a village of about 3,500 people. A lot of the people I'll meet on a daily basis are all dog walkers.
Mm-hmm.
But I went out one day and there were two elderly lady just walking on their own through the fields. And it was at the stage where people sort of did the zigzag away from each other. Am I going to go too close or whatever? Well, I stayed on the path. And when we got level, they said to me, I think it was a nice day. So there was a prompt to start some conversation. And very quickly, it was on to matters to do with lockdown. And I said, well, I have to say to you, I don't believe a word we're being told at the moment. I don't believe that this thing is real in the way they're telling you, and I certainly don't think we're all going to die. And one of those ladies said, oh my goodness, I'm so glad you've said that to me, because you're the first person, it's like a burden taken on. And I was shocked at how animated she was just because I'd said that to her. And then we had a discussion where we discussed a few more, things about facts and statistics and what was true and what was not. But when those two ladies left me, the one that was the main one said, I'm so glad we've met you. And I thought, well, we've got to thank the dog, because if the dog hadn't pushed me out. So, okay, so
good for that. But that's right. It's a bit like the skipping video effect. To know you're not alone was very important.
You're right.
And that's why speaking out was so important.
Right. So you're doing the protest, and then what happens? A journalist comes along.
Yes, wanting to interview me about the campaign against
right.
NAS.
So you're gonna take the paper, Moira, but we know that if it rustles too much, it's a bit of a problem for the microphone.
Well, it's just to show you a 2-page spread.
Yeah.
So I was quite
proud
of that one.
Right, and tell us, this paper is the
Evening Telegraph.
And that is a Dundee
paper. It's
right.
the Courier, and the Evening Telegraph is owned by DC Thomson.
So who appears on the street to talk to you? Is that where they interviewed you?
She phoned. She phoned. She got my phone number from someone. They'd asked permission to give it.
Right. So did they come visit you at home or something?
No, she just did. She phoned, but she didn't say she was recording it.
Right.
And so she's quoted me throughout the whole article.
Right.
And considering I had absolutely no preparation, I did very well.
Right. And
I didn't know it was being recorded.
No. Well, that's pretty deceitful. But so the journalist, who was the journalist? A lady?
Her name was Rachel Amory, and I met her in the street and said told her to her face what she was doing was very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because what she wrote, the first thing I said to her on the phone was, I was not organising. It was not a protest. All we did was hand out leaflets between these times on a Saturday. I repeated it 3 times.
Right.
I would never organise a protest because Nicola Sturgeon had said it was illegal. She did. That was in a newspaper article before a park protest, right? And so I said it 3 times in 3 different ways. I was not organising a protest.
Right.
Right. Thankfully, my husband was in the room at the time because I didn't have any witnesses. I wasn't taping it. And, or I wouldn't have had a witness. Yeah. And she wrote, so when it came out, it said, this Saturday, a protest will take place in Dundee against the mandatory wearing of face coverings.
Yeah.
And then it's saying, how many people actually turn up remains to be seen. But one person will be there, organiser,
Right.
So,
and what's the thrust of this article? How does she describe you?
Well,
apart from an organiser.
Well, it's more like I don't know. The relevant thing, the particularly sinister thing about the article was not it was not that. The sinister thing was that she said I'd organised a protest
when
I hadn't. So I realised I was being set up.
Right.
So I thought, could she be that bad to send a photographer on Saturday? And she knew there was only going to be 3 of us there,
Right.
handing out the leaflets.
Yep. So we got the big
So-
picture here.
Yeah, well, that was
Yeah.
no, but that was it was. She was going to write a follow-up article.
Okay.
So I went down on this. So on the Saturday, I had the sense not to wear my pink top, in case she'd sent a photographer
Right.
to photograph an empty square to do the follow-up article. No one turned up at the protest
Yes.
to reinforce.
Right.
Everyone wants to wear a mask. Do you
Yeah.
see? So, it was really terrible. I really felt the force of the state against me at that point. So I went along, didn't wear my pink top, and eventually I was wandering about, and I saw a man with a zoom lens
Okay.
underneath in the shadows, and I had sunglasses on. I went up to him and I said, "Is there something on today?" And he said, "Oh, it's a protest against the masks." And I said, "Oh, that was cancelled." And he said, "Oh, thanks," and he went away, right? And
Right.
then I went down. And I was ready. I had my megaphone. I went down to the V&A and did a wee protest against Nicola Sturgeon. I thought, well, I'll do a counter. I couldn't fight the print, but I thought I could fight what they said about me online. So it was really anyway.
Yeah.
Then I was sitting in the Meadows in Edinburgh and get an email from a journalist or something saying, "We just want to check a few questions, a few facts with
yeah,
you, right?" And I thought, they're going to do it. They're going to write a follow-up article,
Right.
because he did take a picture of an empty square.
And did they did a follow-up article?
No, well, I sat there and I was shaking. I remember I was absolutely shaking, and I was back to my good letter writing,
Yeah.
thanks to my mother, who was from Dundee. Anyway, I just wrote very, very careful sentence. I said, "I made it very clear to Rachel Emery, the journalist." I said repeated 3 times in
Yes.
3 different ways on the phone, I was not organising a protest.
Yeah.
And I have a witness in the room to prove it.
Right. Yes.
And all of a sudden, they didn't publish it.
Right. Yeah.
didn't publish
Excellent.
it.
Excellent.
But I felt it.
Right. So this obviously puts you in the spotlight locally
Mm-hmm.
and potentially at government level if
Yes.
if Nippy was keen to actually enforce what she said she was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So police got involved eventually.
No, well, that was
much later.
much later, because what I did in the summer of 2021, I decided that maybe I should. Oh no, it was still the 2020. Yes, because I published my book on Amazon.
Okay.
This is not a sales pitch, by the way. I'm just letting you see it.
You are, Moira, you've done so much work. You're fully entitled to be
but
holding your book up. And what we will do is make sure that we got the full details of your book attached to the video so that people...
Yes,
Yeah.
but I'm too busy actually at the moment. I've only got about 20 left because it was banned by Amazon in January 2021. But what happened was, I thought, I started writing for myself.
Yeah.
Not really a diary, but just different things, trying to make sense of it myself, because I realised I was living through a unique time in history. Then, I think it was in the summer, I thought, or later on, I thought, should I, is there any merit in this
Yes.
as a book? Because I had published actually mainly my father's stuff. He was in the Merchant Navy, his writings, and I'd written 3 murder mysteries, which have done quite well. They're set in Glasgow and they're pleasant. But anyway, so I knew how to publish a book. I designed the book cover.
Okay.
So, and I'd created audiobooks with him. So I knew how to do all that. And I thought, there's probably no one else in Britain who's got all these skills.
Yes.
So I felt I had been given them, I had the training, and I had to use it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I ended up putting it, I thought there is merit in it. Some people have had to work throughout and they won't know all this.
Yes.
So I decided, and then I thought, right, how do I do it? And who's going to read this? I'm not a doctor.
Yeah. Well, I've had a little look at this morning while we were talking, just before we got started, and it was quickly getting my attention because you've got a narrative of events in here, but also you've highlighted certain parts with the documents which you've used. So you're evidencing it with documents to show what you're saying and highlighting. And also you've got some very emotional things in here. I picked up on the little letters that some of the elderly people were posting on the windows of the care homes, the residential homes, when they couldn't interact with their relatives. So there would be no... I found those very, very poignant.
Yes, well, what I did was I decided to, because I'd published books in the past, I'd learned how to write the blurb on the back of a book. It's not a synopsis. It's what would make someone read it.
Yes.
So I wrote that. A concerned citizen living in Scotland tries to make sense of the drama surrounding the coronavirus pandemic. From the outset, she kept asking the million-dollar question: why, in order to solve a health crisis, do we have to be locked up?
Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant.
So then I started again writing it with that in mind. So when people are reading it, they're the concerned citizen, or I don't like that word now, but concerned man or woman, reading it. And in some ways it was good that I didn't know more.
Yeah, okay.
Because people say it almost reads like a detective novel, and it reminds them of all the stages it went through.
Yeah, well,
you know.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to actually reading it properly. So you've now got a bit of a name for yourself because you've been picked up by the press. You've done your bit of alerting the public on the streets, choosing my language very carefully, and then you've done the book and the audio book. So what happens then when this starts to come out? Well, you get banned by Amazon.
Right, that's what happened. I published it in December 2020, so I was really glad I got it in that year. So it's the only book out of Scotland.
Right.
And when I published it, when I put it on, I thought, I was taking a real risk, obviously. You don't know who could have gone after me. And I sold 40 in the first month. It was starting to gather a pace.
Right.
And then I received exactly one month later, I think it was the 6th of January 2021, I received an email from Amazon saying it didn't match the World Health Organization guidelines. They were...
Sorry, this is really interesting. So what I thought you were going to say to me, it didn't meet Amazon's guidelines. So
I'm not exactly sure. I've kept it though. I've got the email. So
well, that's come into your mind. So I suspect it is true. But this is very interesting.
I think it was, but I can send that to you. The exact thing I received.
All right, we'll check that. But
anyway, but the email I've got, you see, I appealed, and the email I've got is saying that they were refusing the appeal.
Right.
And it stood the
right.
ban.
Yeah. So you try.
Then I thought, right, how can people even read this? Because that's a cheap way of getting a book out. It costs nothing to upload your manuscript, and it's print on demand. Yeah. So I was in a real pickle. I thought, what am I going to do? Do I give up?
Yeah.
That was an option. But
you
not what
didn't.
I was going to do.
Yeah.
So again, I had the computer skills. I thought, well, I never wanted to ever be wrapping up books and selling them myself, but I knew I had the skills to do a website. Right. So they wouldn't even print it in Scotland. I phoned printers; they were too frightened to print it.
Yeah, and this is terrible, isn't it? When you live in this country, which you think is a country that looks after people and we could go and we think there's law and order and justice and all this stuff, and then you try and do something and you meet people who are frightened, and a lot of them then refuse to do things in a very polite way because actually they're very embarrassed that they're frightened and they're refusing to help you. I've experienced this as well.
Well, one printer, he said he couldn't print it without it being passed by a lawyer. He said, but I'd like to read it. So I sent him the PDF to read it.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting a company in England.
Right.
Who printed it, called Biddles, and beautiful,
so
very good quality.
English are not all bad then.
No, so it's been a great combined effort.
Good. I've been north of the border for a few days, so I've got to stand up for England.
So I think it's a small family outfit, and they've been brilliant. And then, so I didn't know. So I got some copies printed in Berlin actually.
Right.
I could get small print runs there.
Oh, okay.
So I got a small amount printed, and I thought, and then it became the harsh lockdown. Was at level 4, and anyway, in January 2021, and I'd already decided, because I knew it was a real problem. The libraries had been shut for nearly a year,
Yeah.
and a lot of people had nothing to read.
Right.
My cousin only has a radio, and it was a real thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, imagine that, and nothing but propaganda on the radio, nothing else. Anyway, because he was a real library goer. And so it was a real problem. So I decided I would do a charitable act and operate a mobile suitcase library. And I had a collection of social history. My dad's book was called Dundee Memories. It had a really nice collection. And this book was in it. And Vernon Coleman, I think, had his.
Okay,
The first half of his was good, the diary entries. And this was the one, though, that people were wanting to borrow the most.
Right.
So I did a proper library card, had a little library book. You know, it was a real little library, and ran it from 12 to 1 on Saturdays.
And what did you go out somewhere centrally to do that?
Just outside the city square.
Right.
And it was a wonderful initiative.
Right, and this was still on your own, or did you have
No,
another
I had,
lady?
yeah, there was a woman with me. There was 2 of us, I think, on the first day.
Right.
I even had people singing in French. On the first outing, I have non rien de rien. Edith Piaf. Yes.
Right.
So the police had to get me off the streets, because I even had a man from a hostel who had been to RADA in London, and he was doing his own poetry. So they had to get me off the streets. I was a real danger.
No, this is very this is very interesting. So you take the initiative with a suitcase of books, but then other people join you.
Well, they were 2 women that I knew. Anyway, Stella, who ended up being arrested with me, she was there. She'd missed her bus the first week.
Right.
She was there. So these were people I knew.
Right.
So how many carefully before we did it.
How many times did you do this before the police showed an interest?
It was the third. Well, they came up on the first day and asked us what we were doing.
Right.
And I explained to them, because I also knew that charitable acts were exempt.
Right.
So I felt I had all bases covered.
Yeah.
That they couldn't, get me on anything. So it was the third Saturday. They said the level had changed to 4, and gatherings were then illegal. So they stormed the city centre with a van, and the police charged out. This is in the drug death capital of Europe, by the way.
Right. Okay. So there was you. Was there a couple of ladies?
Yeah, there were 3 of us.
And how many police turned up?
Was it about 4 in a van?
Yeah, it would have to be, wouldn't it? But Police Scotland are so tough; it would need 4 of them to arrest 2 ladies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I just stuck up for myself in the beginning. Said, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's a charitable act. It's a suitcase library, and the libraries are closed. And
yeah. So what did they do?
At the moment she slammed the suitcase shut, I thought, well, I'm not going to argue with the police.
Yeah.
And I packed up, and at one point the police were holding on to me, and I don't know how I managed, but I managed to pull away.
Yeah.
And I was running towards home, pulling my suitcase.
Yeah.
And they came running after me and dragged me back.
Right, so what happened? They got you.
They took Stella. It was terrible the way they treated her. You could show that video to the viewers if you want. I can got it on my web.
I think we should.
It's horrible. And they pushed her into the van, and that was the worst bit of the entire thing, actually. I was being caged in the back of this police
this
van.
is very, very scary for people that haven't ever had cause to engage with the police. I know from a lot of people they find it a very frightening experience. And of course the police can be very brutal, so they like the fear factor. But it's the same when you experience police coming into your house, which I've had on 2 occasions. And the first time, I was sort of very, very careful in what I was saying to them. But the second time, I just found it amusing at the games they were trying to play. But just to get a bit of lightheartedness into this, my hallway, the ceiling is very low. I'm not a very tall bloke, but the ceiling is very low. And I made sure that the 2 very tall police officers had to stay talking to me in my hall, so they were both hunched over the whole time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes.
They put you in a van. What happens then?
But Stella was put in van first. They were standing holding on to me very tightly by then, and they'd put handcuffs on me. And I said to the policewomen, please don't do that. I said, my arms are completely limp. I made my arms completely limp, and she still did it. She said, you don't get a say.
Yeah.
And so I was handcuffed, and I had to wait about 20 minutes till another van came.
Right.
Then I was put in the cage, and it was so claustrophobic.
Were you both in the same van?
No.
Oh, wow.
She was put in a cage in another van.
Yeah.
But it was, it's that wide. It's so, and I suffer from claustrophobia. It was horrific. I knew that Dundee police station was really close to the city centre, so I was just stay calm, breathe, because I had 3 jumpers on and a coat and a hat because I thought I was going to be outside.
Yeah.
So we were taken to the police station and kept it in a cell for 5.5 hours. But they took my DNA, came into the cell and did that, and then they fingerprinted me in a. This is the interesting bit. They took me from an outdoor space and they put me into a tiny internal room. The police were hanging on to me, of course, for about an hour. And then they took me into this tiny internal unventilated room where I had my fingerprints taken, and a woman was holding on to me for about 10 minutes. So they weren't frightened of anything. If you believe their narrative, they were putting me in danger. If you believe their narrative.
Yeah.
But so they took that, and then when I was eventually.
So what were you held in a cell? You did the fingerprints, and then you were put in a cell.
Yeah, I was in a cell. Then you were taken to the fingerprints.
All right. What was the cell like?
It wasn't as bad as I thought. As I say, the worst part was I didn't feel so claustrophobic in that because I was really worried about that. It was more it was the cage in the back of the police van.
During all of this furore, COVID lockdown, in Cornwall, a young girl was arrested, a young lady, early 20s if I remember correctly, and they took her to a police station and did all that. She was then put in a cell and locked in a cell, and there was a toilet in the cell with no seat, and directly opposite that toilet was a CCTV camera.
Oh, right. Goodness.
Right. And the effect, of course, on her terrifying experience, never interacted with the police, but you got through her story, and I've been into police stations with other people, and the oppression and the use of fear on somebody that hasn't even been proven guilty is just outrageous.
Yes.
So I'm going to say that if we've got any serving police officers that are listening to our interaction today, I think you should really have a think about what you're doing and the behaviour of some of your colleagues, because it's very apparent to me that we have very big, strong police officers who are they're sadistic, basically. They enjoy frightening and brutalising people, and yet we are supposed to be a Western society that stands up for law and order. So that was bad for you. What about the other lady?
She's tougher than me.
Okay.
She's saying they took the bait, because it did show. It told you everything you needed to know about. Right. That we were in a terrifying situation.
Yeah.
We uncovered, highlighted that. But,
did you get questioned? Did they do?
I was never questioned, but when I went up to be charged, Stella was given hers was.
When you say you hang on, when you said you went up, do you mean you were
taken up
from the cells?
From the cell, and if you don't sign your bail conditions and the sheet, you'll be taken back down.
Right.
So my bail conditions were I wasn't to go into Dundee City Centre, or go to any protest.
Right.
The solicitor said you don't even get that with knife crime. That I think
Yes.
if you're charged, you know,
Right.
that you can't go into. It was a huge area. I wasn't allowed to enter.
Right. So, and that was the same for both of you then?
Yeah, she was given
Right.
those. It seemed at that time everyone being arrested in Scotland were the bail conditions were we weren't to attend any protest.
Okay.
And I said it wasn't a protest.
Right.
We were operating a library out of a suitcase.
Right.
But anyway,
But you signed, and then you were released from the.
well, the serious
Excuse
thing
me.
is,
Yeah.
Stella was charged under the coronavirus regulations or whatever. I couldn't believe it when I looked at the sheet and it said culpable and reckless conduct. I was being charged with culpable and reckless conduct.
Right, okay.
I thought that sounds horrific. So I went home, looked it up immediately, and it said maximum sentence in Scotland for that is life imprisonment. Life imprisonment. Yeah. So I think that's
So-
what they did to the miners in the 80s. You know, when the police committed the riot at Orgreave,
Yes.
the police charged the men with the riot, and at the time that was a life imprisonment sentence.
Yeah.
So nothing's been sorted, I think, since the 1980s.
No,
You know.
but the other thing we can say is that many of these police officers, men and women, are stupid enough to enforce laws and edicts from the government, which are ultimately going to ensnare them and their families as well. This is the craziness of it. Okay, so what happened to those charges then? Where did that subsequently go?
3 hours before the trial, I got a phone call from my solicitor saying that the case was not called. It was not going to be called.
Okay.
So
you have to explain that to me, because obviously we've got differences with the law and how the judicial system works in Scotland. So explain what that actually meant.
Well, they weren't going to.
It had been dropped.
I don't. The exact term is not called.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but I think that was over. But That's when I met Sandra Gallagher, who studied law, and anyway, she helped me throughout because the whole thing was very frightening.
Yeah.
And a week before, I got a phone call from my solicitor saying that I had to go into court the next morning, and the police had more evidence against me.
Right.
So at that point, I was really frightened because I thought they've got my fingerprints, they've got my DNA. What are they going to stitch me up for?
Yeah.
And they didn't call Stella; it was just me. And I went anyway. Turned out it was nothing. But I thought that was less than 24 hours notice. I was called, and if I hadn't gone, I think they would have sent out a search warrant to arrest me.
Yeah.
So it was real intimidation, and but it turned out he was getting reams of stuff sent through. I said I don't know what that is. I've never seen that before, and it turned out it was all in relation to Stella.
Okay.
And one was a handwritten hymn, which was a nice one. Is it?
Well, that
in her
would,
handbag.
that would have been really frightening for them, wouldn't it? Some dangerous citizen has written a prayer. Well, a hymn.
Yeah, it was a song to sing. It was very nice.
Right.
And even the sheriff looked embarrassed. You know, that nobody quite knew why I was there. And he said, he said to the solicitor, "You ready?" Anyway, it was nothing. It was over. It was nothing.
So, but
it was just to further intimidate me and further make me pay out in expenses. You know, if I'm paying a solicitor, I had to pay for him to be there.
Right.
You know, so it's just. I think they just go for it to try and wreck you financially.
Well, that's always the case, and frighten you and stress you. But does this mean that you had one appearance in front of a sheriff, and then it ended?
Well, I went the first time. Everyone thought it'd be dropped. Is that called a pleading diet? And so I pleaded not guilty.
Right.
As did Stella. And then I had the extra appearance when they were intimidating me, and then the trial, and it was dropped. So it didn't actually. There was nothing actually discussed.
And have you still got restrictions on you now?
No, I don't. But I'm going for them with the help of, you see, I ended up forming, it's called Police Scotland Angels with Sandra, because she was there was a lot of people arrested in January 2021 in Edinburgh.
Right.
Because the police said protests were illegal in that month.
right.
So she started trying to help other people.
Yeah.
So, but she didn't have IT skills, so I did the website. And so it's been a great... I've just worked with different people, different small teams to fight this tyranny. So I've learned a lot about the whole, the law, the judiciary, how it all works. And in Kirkcaldy, so it's all been fascinating. Horribly. Horribly
fascinating. Well, Moira, I've got to say to you that your story is a wonderful story, because it's an ordinary person, if I'm allowed to call you that, who gets curious, but then you decided to do something, and you did some things which, even going into a public place in order to speak to people, that can be scary for some people. It can be difficult. You might not have found that bit, but you did all these things, and then your life must have changed, from a lady who's done all the normal things to being the lady who's been locked up in a police cell. That's an amazing. That's a major impact on your life. How did? Am I able?
And people were telling my father, he was 95. They were saying that I would go to jail.
Yeah.
And he was saying, he said, I can't see that. He said, what is it you're supposed to have done?
Yeah.
He couldn't understand it, because he had powers of logic.
Right. And am I able to ask, what reaction did you get from friends? Were they supportive of the fact that they were now associated with a...
Well, I think, this is definitely split society.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't go to the same things I did.
Yeah.
That's very sad.
Did you lose friends?
Yes, well, I was in a golf team, table tennis team, badminton team, and I don't do anything now. I just, because I think we have no life unless this is sorted in some way that we can relax. I can't, there's no future. If we get digital ID in, there's no future, making that it's accepted. There is no future, so
because
I can't relax.
If we just put
my chipping.
Put those two together, because digital ID comes in it, and it means that the state knows everything about you. There is no distance. There's no separation between any man, woman or child and the state. The state controls such a quantity of data and such personal data. The state owns you. That's how I see it.
Well, I did a little video again on my YouTube channel, Moira Dundee, and that was quite short, but it shows a checkpoint in Northern Ireland. I was there. I couldn't get into an outdoor Christmas market. They had people that security on the door of the open air space, and people were showing their phones. And I got the footage of that. And comparing it to, after the war, they kept the ID cards.
Yeah, they did,
And then, but I did a video showing we don't want to be this paper police society. But, so we saw how they did it with the vaccine passports. We don't need to see whether they're capable of it. They definitely are. But Peter Hitchin, I heard an interview with him, I think it was from 2017, and it was very good. And he was explaining it. Digital ID, it's government digital ID, and it puts the government above us, above our heads rather than below us. And they won't do it initially, but they make it conditional.
Well, it creeps in, doesn't it?
And somebody said that to me, so they could make it, you can't get benefits unless you're taking so many vaccinations, or you can't get your bus pass, whatever it is. But somebody said, oh, you're always thinking the worst, always presuming the worst. They might not do that. And I said to them, well, I said, why would you allow a system to be in place where they could do it? No, we don't. Well, we're not going to allow it.
this is the weakness of a lot of people. They, through no fault of their own, are nice people. They're good people, and they find it very difficult to get their good minds in to understand there are people who are utterly vile. They're malicious. They're psychopathic, and many of those people are now in the government and the government systems. And I spent 20 years in the military, and in that time, of course, it was supposed to be the Russians and the Warsaw Pact that were the the nasty communists and they were going to come and murder us. But since my Navy time, I'm watching what I regard as a Soviet system take over UK. It's brutal, and I believe it is worse than the Soviet system, because at least in the Soviet states, people knew what their own governments were. They knew that the state was dangerous. They knew secret police were operating. But here, we've got this veneer of respectability. The state pretends that it's.
That's what Peter Hitchens said. He said everyone would laugh at what the paper said or the state was, was saying. Whereas here, people believe the BBC.
Yeah,
that's more dangerous.
And just to we're laughing as we go through this story, but it is very it's very serious. Over the last few days, we have met ladies from a children's home that supposedly provided respite. It was called Fenethy. And over a period of 30 years, little girls, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, went to that house supposedly for some form of respite stay. They came from very poor areas in Glasgow, Scotland. And during that time, the minimum was they were brutalised, and the ladies talked about what had happened to them, hit, left in cold rooms overnight, brutalised in all sorts of ways. And ultimately, the undertone is a lot of them talked about they were given a glass of milk at night, and after that they never remembered anything else, right? So we're working with these ladies, but what I want to emphasise is, with the evidence of hundreds of ladies now coming forward to talk about their experience in Fenethy, they have tried to engage with Police Scotland. Police Scotland don't want to engage with them. They don't want to investigate. They show no sympathy. But Police Scotland can come with 2 vans and arrest 2 ladies and get you in a police cell. But when we have women coming who's talking about how they were brutalised and without a doubt many of them sexually abused, the same police force, the same judiciary system doesn't want. So this
is police is in a bad way.
Well, but this is where the ordinary person needs to wake up, because what is being installed in Scotland and the rest of UK is a vicious system.
That's right, but they won't even need police. Once they've got their facial recognition, I think that's going to be on top of the LED street lighting, and anyway, just everywhere you go, they'll just send fines directly, or maybe they could put you in a electric bus and take you straight to a prison or something. Yes. I don't think even the police are going to need it,
and of course,
in the future.
We've now got a system where if you're brought to trial, you don't necessarily appear in a court. It can be a remote hearing.
That's right.
And therefore you don't even know that the data feed, the video feed of that hearing can be manipulated. It can be altered. We see them altering documents.
That's what Sandra's exposing. These pronto pads, they're called.
Right.
They can edit them after. They can actually edit anything digital. It can be changed afterwards. So it's not a fair process. But I wanted to just to finish the police story. I'm going for them. I mean, that woman broke the law, arresting me because I had done nothing wrong.
Right.
It was a charitable act and everything, but it wasn't even, anyway. But if that doesn't frighten people, I think it did say in the police document that I had organised a gathering which risked the spreading coronavirus.
Right.
Now that means they can just lift anyone they don't like off the street.
Yeah.
Now if that doesn't terrify people, I don't know what will. But I've got it now. She's helped me with the process and just going through their complaints procedure, which is the police and the police. But anyway, you've got to do it. But I've got assurance so far that my DNA and fingerprints have been destroyed, have been taken off the database.
Yeah. I say yeah.
Yeah.
Right, now
allegedly,
Maura, I think we're just about coming up to the end of time for this, but it's been utterly brilliant. We had a UK column meeting in Motherwell last night, which was wonderful. lovely people came along, and we had a very good session, and questions asked and answered, and everything else. Where am I getting to? There are people that are active, and I said at the meeting last night very strongly that I'd been fascinated as a man to see women becoming very fiery and doing things. And I think you've given a classic example today. So you're a woman who decided something was wrong, and then you stood up to be counted. And I said to the ladies in the audience last night, you are very important people, because we can now see that actually women are being attacked, singled out. If you can't go to, if you can't go, what do you call it up here, to the privy, the lavatory, the WC, the bathroom, whatever it is, you can't go there and know that there's not going to be a man in there. A male. Yeah. This is a terrible position. And of course, everything about being a mother is being attacked. And now we're saying, and particularly in Scotland, we can't define what a woman is. We don't know what a woman is. So I said to the audience...
A woman has a womb.
Well, an
There you are.
adult
Solved that
female.
one.
Right, thank you. So I said to the ladies in the audience, you've got to fight, because this is going for you. But I also said, and I think this is true, at the end of the day, when the women start fighting, this is a powerful thing. And of course, if you are kicking the backsides of the men, we're getting more men standing up. Because a lot of men have been very casual about some of this stuff. So I'm, if I may, saying to you, well done for what you've done. What's your message to other people out there?
Well, because I did see it and I was horrified, I could see that, and I heard Bill Gates early on saying, life isn't going to go back to normal until we get a vaccination. And so I could see, the whole lockdown was coercion. You don't get your life back until you take the vaccine. Well, that is the ultimate coercion, isn't it? So... I couldn't, I used to wake up every morning and, I couldn't believe, is this really happening? It was just really, because it's so evil. I couldn't believe it. But speaking out did make me feel better. I thought I was going to have a heart attack right at the beginning. But once I spoke out, I actually felt better. And, but I had done architecture and computer programming, completely solitary things. I had done no public speaking. I had never spoken out. And I just thought, I have to find my voice, no matter what. Just say it, do it, because it's so serious. And
what you did, other people can do, but it's feel the fear, isn't it? There's that little expression, feel the fear, but do it anyway.
And I knew when I took my skipping ropes, I thought, if it's by speaking out against this, I could end up in a police cell. And I did. But I knew, so you just have to do it anyway. But I was saying, since I have got, I have printed, had people going around the Highlands giving them out. There's been 1,600 free copies distributed throughout Scotland, and people pass them on. The audio version.
So you say that you're short of these now, but can you still get these printed?
Yeah, I can get more printed. But I've had 1,600 printed so far.
So for somebody to get a hard copy, how do they do that?
It's on my website, questioninglockdown.com.
But
what I wanted to say on the listen tab, you can listen to the whole book for free.
Okay.
So I'm actually not trying to make money. I'm just trying to get people to listen to it.
Or
share the link. Because you can share the link to New Zealand and it costs nothing.
You
see, it's great. And it's changed minds. It really has changed minds. People have said to me, and they didn't take the vaccination because they read it. Which is wonderful.
Great. I think there's power in both things, because people will listen to somebody as something as an audio, and they really get something from that. I also believe that there's something about a book in your hand, and that when somebody gives you a book, and books get passed on, they can go around a lot of people. So I think there's merit to both, and we will.
Some people don't have a computer. Or a phone.
So your message to the audience is, even though it's scary. It is possible for one individual to stand up against the state. And
yes, well, I kind of look back now. I know how the world really works now.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I think of me hitting the streets of Dundee with my little leaflet by myself. And I think sometimes it's good to be naive.
Yeah. Well,
because it's laughable, really, now. You think they own the media, they own, but I did it.
Well,
I did it, and
I started out. The first ever talk I did was in a village hall. It was the local village hall.
Mm-hmm.
There were 17 people.
Right.
And the bit that I always laugh about is that when it came to questions, it went on and on and on. And eventually it was after midnight and I was saying to these people, go home.
Right.
But me doing that with 17 people then led to, I've done over 400 public talks now. And I could never have imagined how that sort of spread and grew. So
so I would say that don't question too much. I do it myself, and I think if people, we've been put down at school and everything. Who's going to listen to you? That's what people say. The experts. You're not an expert. Who's going to listen to you? So don't ever think that you're insignificant and that. I mean, I do it myself. I keep saying, is there any, putting in this effort, will it pay off? Or
well, it has.
And don't even think it, because every little helps.
Brilliant.
So I would say that's a nice ending.
Last question, which you don't have to answer, but is your husband proud of you?
Well, I don't know, but we're still together, and our views are a bit different. But he's been supportive throughout.
Yeah, brilliant.
And that's probably helped too, because he's been someone to debate with.
Oh, If there's two of you or more, you're far stronger. So excellent, Moira. I'm going to say thank you so much for doing this with me today. Brave enough to sit down with me, because you've never met me before. We've just had a 5-minute chat and come into this room, but my goodness, what a story. So I'm going to say thank you for the interview, and thank you very much for being brave enough to stand up and take on the Scottish state. And I'm sure you've made a difference.
Well, thank you, but I couldn't have done it without finding the right people at the right time.
Yeah, but they come. When you start to do something, the right people will come. We'll say to our audience, we hope you've enjoyed our conversation, and we particularly hope that our conversation and all of Moira's brave efforts prompts you to do more yourselves, because what we need is a very large number of people doing a few of the right things. That's the power to change what's happening. And our children need us to do this.
And stay free, resist digital ID.
Okay, we'll end there. Moira, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.